Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of The Real Forno Show, sponsored by our friends at Lake Monster Brewing. This evening, I have two of the smartest individuals in the draft community when it comes to small school guys and sleepers. Blue Chip Scouting Zone, Devin Jackson and Mike Hrynyshyn. After that, we will do our weekly mock draft, and we will try to predict the Vikings' future, which is just 10 short days away. So stick around to another episode of The Real Forno Show.
Welcome to the Real Forno Show. Tyler Forness, contributor at NBC Sports Edge and USA Today's Vikings Wire, along with being a member at Climbing the Pocket.
You are looking live at two nicely groomed young men and a 9-year-old child. My name is Tyler Forness, and with me are two of my really good friends who are the foremost experts when it comes to small school guys and sleepers. And they are Blue Chip Scouting Zone, Devin Jackson and Mike Hrynyshyn. Boys, we're going to start off with a little bit of fun. Mike, why don't you tell me about this quarterback class?
I hate the fact that you're doing this to me and making me have to talk quarterbacks. I should have talked to you about this earlier. I am on a strict no quarterback diet until the 28th.
I know that was just all in fun. Gentlemen, I appreciate you stopping by tonight and being able to educate the guys on these small school prospects, because let's just be honest here. They are just as important as the big names because they fill out so much depth of the roster, and you can really find some hidden gems in the later rounds. Mike, how are you doing?
Doing pretty good. This is a nice break from what I could be watching, which is a very bad playoff game. So thank you for having me on.
Hey, absolutely. Devin, you and I just recorded the Vikings mock draft for Blue Chip Scouting here just a few days ago. It's good to see you again. How are you?
Yeah, doing pretty good. Just getting prepared for a busy last week right before the draft and trying to finish some more prospects. But the ones Pelicans are in the playoffs too, so been monitoring that and having a little bit of extra workload, especially since they weren't able to make or weren't expected to make the playoffs at the very least. And I know you're checking out your Minnesota Timberwolves as well, but I'm a draft front. Always excited to talk about prospects, and small school prospects is my thing.
Absolutely, and we're going to start off with one because Dan brings it up, and he was not on the list, but he's somebody that we should talk about, and that is Idaho State's Tanner Conner. He's a very unique guy, really nice height, weight, and speed receiver, does not have any form of production playing for the Idaho State Vandals in that beautiful Kibbe Dome because they were 1-10 last year, and they just are not very good at this whole football thing. But Conner's a very intriguing guy. I believe he was on Bruce Feldman's freaks list. Mike, when you look at Tanner Conner and what the profile that he has to offer in the National Football League, what do you think?
Like you said, height, weight, speed. Haven't had a chance to really study him too in depth because, shocker, it is really hard to get Idaho State film. But he kind of reminds me a little bit. You're probably a little easier in terms of what year this was than I am, because it's all a big blur to me when you've been doing this for 9 years. Ryan Swope out of Texas A&M, who unfortunately never caught on in the league because of concussion injuries. I want to say it was 2015 or 16 draft, but very similar. Where just like taller dude, really fast. Wasn't too much of a prospect, I think, due to injuries and age. But Tanner Conner, in terms of size and size and potential, kind of reminds me a lot of what we would have thought of Ryan Swope coming out in that draft class.
Devin?
Yeah, he hasn't been someone that I got to watch extensively, but he was at the East-West Shrine game, and he showed some flashes. Now, there's kind of been talks around where he's going to be used at the NFL level, because, he has the high weight speed you look for, but is he going to be able to separate the NFL level? That's kind of what I worry about looking at his film and just what he was asked to do at Idaho State. He has great, YAC numbers and great, per average reception numbers, but how's that going to translate to NFL level? So I think he could be in a discussion, maybe a Jacob Harris type, where he played receiver, at the college level, but maybe makes that transition to tight end and kind of utilizes his skill set and his size to be able to match up to linebackers and safety. So I think he's one that you're going to have a plan with if you end up drafting him or taking him as a UDFA. But it may be worth trying him out as a stretch tight end, as a F style tight end, where you put him in motion and maybe use him on seam routes and whatnot, and if he can't get on the field as a receiver, of course. But I think he's an interesting player with an interesting profile, and I'm very interested to see how teams feel about him and where he ultimately ends up going.
So now here's my question for you, Devin, because when you talk about a transition from wide receiver to tight end, you're talking about a big transition, because unless you're going to be a Dan Arnold type where you have really no genuine physical strength to be able to make inline kind of blocks, you're talking about a really big transition. And Tanner Conner, I believe he weighs about 220, 225, so he has a little bit more mass to him. But how long of a transition are we talking for a position that usually takes 3 years to see what the projected ceiling might be for a player?
Well, I think it kind of depends on, like I said, how you want to use them. And as Tyler Browning makes a comment about Hakeem Butler, it's really a case by case basis. And like I said, I think you obviously try him out a receiver, see if he sticks there. But to me, I think you put in packages for him, so to speak, where maybe he doesn't make a full transition in time. Maybe he's a big slot. You use him in kind of that role instead of maybe a true traditional form. So I think with him, obviously, you got to take a look at what the blocking profile is, if there's something there. Because at 220, 225, I mean, you don't really need to be a 240, 250 guy to play tight end. John Smith is a perfect example. He's a bit of a bigger guy, but he's not exactly hulking like a Travis Kelce or George Kittle. So I think there could certainly be a role for him. And I think with him, it's just really about getting him in the building, seeing what he can do, seeing his skill set, and then get creative and how you use him, especially if you want him on the field.
Absolutely. And we're going to have to try and speed this up a little bit because we have a lot of guys, and I know that there are some favorites in here for both of you. Yes. The next guy I want to talk about, I want to continue with the wide receiver position because, he also went to my high school, so I got a soft spot in my heart for him. And that is Northern Iowa's Isaiah Weston, another height, weight, speed guys. And it feels like we are talking about height, weight, speed guys throughout this draft. You have Connor, who's going to be a late round guy, Isaiah Weston, a late round guy, Christian Watson, Alec Pierce. There's a lot of these guys who can really make that kind of translation. Mike, Isaiah Weston, decent production, big time measurables.
Sorry.
Tell me about him.
Watched him a little bit over the summer, and again, like you said, measurables, speed, great hands. Didn't really get too much of a chance to focus in on him again because all of the plaudits in that Iowa State offense. I say Iowa State, Northern Iowa. Sorry,
yes.
Offense go to Trevor Penning, who I think Forno, you and I have talked to death about my feelings on Trevor Penning. Isaiah Weston, I think he's going to be someone where you can get him probably in that 5th or 6th round. He's going to stick around because it's hard to teach that combination. We talk about how many height, weight, speed guys there are in this class, but at the end of the day, that helps you stick around in the NFL. Like we see a lot of 6'4", 230-pound wide receivers that run a 4.7 flame out almost every year because they can't separate. But when you're 6'4", 220 and run a 4.4, and can jump out of the gym, you'll stick around for a lot longer than a lot of the people picked ahead of you. I think he's going to be someone that's going to be a great value. He's probably going to be like a 4th or 5th wide receiver in someone's offense right away, but he can definitely become like a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, which in today's NFL is incredibly valuable. We're not in the days of the late 90s, early 2000s where, 1 or 2 wide receivers was really all you were seeing. Teams are going empty way more often than not.
Absolutely. Devin, when you take a look at Isaiah Weston, do you see some of the same things Mike does, or do you have a little bit of a different perspective?
Yeah, and I think maybe we're capping his ceiling a little bit. And I think maybe I mean, depending on the offense, he can be a true vertical deep threat. That's what he was at Northern Iowa. He was able to get behind the defense, and due to inconsistent quarterback play, his numbers could have been more Christian Watson-esque, more so than we think. And I think I'm kind of surprised that his name has really started to gain traction later than I expected, because he didn't get the major All Star invite like Christian Watson, obviously. But in terms of deep threat, he's also a true natural separator in the air, and he can get behind the defense and really cause issues. And that 4.4 speed is exactly what you see on tape with him. So I think for him, I think Mike had it right with him being a wide receiver 3 or 4, but I can see some packages have him kind of in that condensed formation, like bunch set, and him taking the top off the defense and then getting behind on a post, or just clearing out the 2 high safeties or 1 high safety. So I think he has some possibilities. I think obviously he's going to have to continue to grow as a route runner and become a more technical and clean route runner. But I think he already has some skill set there, and you're just going to have to continue to refine that and allow him to find a way on the football field, because receiver rooms are getting more and more stacked every year. Receiver, and Tyler, you talked about this, receiver is becoming a replaceable position. So he's going to come in on a rookie contract. Maybe by year 2, year 3, he's becoming a serious contributor, and he can really bring some value to the NFL squad.
I completely agree. And as we're kind of talking about receivers, we're going to transition over to the defensive backfield and the guys who are trying to cover these players. And we have 4 that we're going to talk about here today. And the first one I want to talk about is Sam Houston State's Zion McCullum. And I know it's somebody that both of you have watched. Devin, I know you're high on this guy. He tested with a perfect 10 relative athletic score at the cornerback position, essentially saying he is the most athletic corner to come out of the NFL into the NFL draft since 1987. And let's be honest, before 1987, there's not going to be any more athletic than Zion McCullum. Devin, when you take a look at McCullum's tape at Sam Houston State, he's obviously playing in the FCS in the Southland Conference. They are moving up to, I believe, the Sun Belt here in the next couple of years. But when you look at McCullum and what he was able to do in college at the Senior Bowl, how do you think he projects, and where do you think he's going to end up going in the draft?
Well, I'll tell you what, I think he's going to end up going higher than we expect. Now, I would not be surprised if he went day 2, because I think when you have guys that can move like that, has that height, weight, size that we've been talking about all show long, that's kind of a rare athlete to have on the field. And similar to Tariq Woolen in terms of athletic testing and just what he brings in measurables, I think Zion McCullum is a ball hawk. He's someone that goes after the football, played man coverage, played zone coverage, played a little bit of everything at Sam Houston State. But I think, there are times or he just needs to improve on locating the football down the field in those man coverage situations, because against Montana State, a guy that actually I dropped to Mike and some of the other guys at Blue Chip Scouting, Lance McCutcheon from Montana State. He got behind him a couple times and was able to be on some deep passes. So I do think there's going to be room for improvement in finding or honing in those technical aspects of the game. But I think Zion, he's going to be an interesting guy, because how are you going to utilize him early on? Because I think he's not going to be someone you throw out there on an island immediately. I think there's still some clunkiness in his transitions. I think that he's not as fluid as athletic testing suggests, and I think the development is going to have to continue. But I could see him being matched up, or at least early on, put him in sub packages, match him up against bigger slots and tight ends to kind of utilize that length, but eventually become a CB2 will be his ceiling for me.
Mike?
Absolutely agree with everything Devin just said. You really can't have enough athletes out there, especially on defense. If we're talking about all these freak athletes on offense, you need someone to match up with them defensively. And like you said, Zion McCullum being the best athlete we've seen at the corner position to come out in the draft since 1987, that speaks volumes. Like, technique is going to take some time. Like you said, Devin, there's some stiffness in transitions that can be coached up. You can't teach that type of athleticism. And Sam Houston State, they've been a factor in the FCS playoffs for a couple of years now. They won the FCS national title during the shortened spring season. A lot of it on defense was because of the work that Zion McCullum's put in. He is an eraser at that level, and that's exactly what you want from someone on film. I don't want it on FCS level film and see and have any doubts as to who that player is. I shouldn't have to really go looking for that player. They stand out, and Zion McCullum is definitely among the best players in FCS in general. And I think that's probably going to translate into a late day 2, early day 3 pick.
Absolutely, and there's another guy who could potentially make a rise for some similar athletic traits. Mike, it's somebody you're really familiar with, and that's Baylor's Kalen Barnes, an absolute blazer at the cornerback position, running in the 4.2s. What is your opinion on Barnes? And I feel like he might end up being best as a safety prospect at the National Football League level. Well, what are your thoughts on him and how he projects?
I don't mean this in any disrespect to Kalen Barnes, but normally when someone is the third best defensive back in a foursome, that's a bad thing. It's not in his case because he also happened to be back there with Jalen Petrie and JT Woods, who was one of the leaders in interceptions. Kalen Barnes was by far the better corner on Baylor. There's a reason that teams tended to pick on Riley Texada, which was just the weak man in that 4-man group. But Kalen Barnes can just erase a side of the field. I thought he was the best defensive back down at the Shrine game. We talked about you and I at Forno during that week. Tay Martin, possibly the best wide receiver down at the Shrine game. The only defensive back that gave him any form of resistance and actually took it to him was Kalen Barnes. And then we saw him show up to the combine and he ran, 4.23, something absurd like that. Again, like I said, with Zion McCullum, you need freak athletes to keep up with a Tyreek Hill, and having someone that can run a 4.2 something and has good ball production. Maybe it's as a safety, maybe it's as a corner. Don't really think it matters. You just find a spot for him in that secondary. Teams are going with 5-6 defensive backs. He needs to be one of them.
Devin, do you share one of the same sentiments as Mike? And then we're going to move on and talk about your guy from Florida A&M, Marquis Bell.
Yeah, so with Kalen Barnes, I mean, Mike talked about bringing him in the secondary. Why not put him at nickel and have him be able to match with some of those faster, quicker nickels and be physical at the line of scrimmage? He has the straight line speed to catch up with anyone. So I think that could be a valuable asset, especially for a championship level team. I think teams like maybe, like the Bills, for example, I don't think they necessarily need Kalen Barnes, but you bring him in to kind of neutralize whatever Kansas City is going to do, or Miami. I mean, they clearly are loading up on weapons as well with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. So I think with him, you bring him in and you just let him figure out where he just best fits. And I think someone with his skill set, ball skills, speed, and physicality at the line of scrimmage, I think you're going to find a way to get on the field. Obviously, having as maybe a gunner early on the special team side of things, use that speed to go down and make some tackles, but then also find yourself in sub packages and third and long situations where you're trying to stop, high octane offenses.
Agree completely. And then we're, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about your guy Marquis Bell from Florida A&M. And Marquis Bell is a really interesting prospect. Very athletic and really showed out for I can't remember. Are they the Dragons? I think they're the Dragons.
They're the Rattlers.
The
Florida A&M Rattlers.
Okay. So Florida A&M, Marquis Bell, heck of a prospect. What is it about his game that stands out for you?
He does everything for that defense. Like he's all over the field whenever you turn on the film, and even casually viewing. I remember watching him live against, I believe it was against Bethune-Cookman earlier in the season. He had like a 3-play stretch where he forced a fumble. Then on the very next play, he got an interception and nearly took it for 6. And then he came down and made a tackle for loss. So for me, he's the type of safety that you want him free roaming. You want him. You can play him that too high set and allow him to be down in the box and make impact plays in a run game, but also match up with tight ends and slot receivers because he did that very, very well at the FCS level. Obviously a guy that, a bit of a background. He got kicked out of Maryland but landed at Florida A&M. So I think, kind of the background is not going to see him go before day 3. But to me, he has a day 2 skill set where you bring him in immediately. He can play from a 2 high set. You can rotate him into cover 3 looks in 1 high man coverage. He has that type of range and ability. And then he has the ball skills. He's going to force fumbles. He's he has that Tyrann Mathieu-esque personality where he wants to take the ball away from you. So for me, he actually ended up with a late day 2 grade for me. He may not go until mid day 3, but I think he's going to come in immediately and be an impact player at the NFL level. I mean, there were scouts coming to Florida A&M just to see him, or even at other FCS games in the HBCU to see him go against various opponents. And every single game you can find him on tape making plays all over the field. And I just love this guy. He's one of my favorite prospects in this class.
Mike, do you have anything to add about Marquis Bell?
Well, I mean, that is Devin's guy, and it should surprise no one that Devin loves, a Florida A&M safety, because that is like as on brand for Devin as it gets. But one thing that stood out to me while he was talking there was the fact that he was at Maryland. Can you imagine how good that Maryland secondary would be if they had him and Nick Cross back there? No one would throw down the middle for them. Oh, that's
Iowa definitely would not have put up 50 points.
No. Or Maryland.
Yeah, and we have one last defensive back that we're going to get to here tonight. And Mike, we're going to start with you. Fayetteville State's Joshua Williams went to the Senior Bowl, and really the only bad thing that I heard about him the entire week there was that he played at Fayetteville State, which is always a good sign with a lower level guy. What do you like about Joshua Williams?
Love the length. I think he's very physical. Haven't done my final eval on him. He's actually my final eval and tape eval on him is scheduled for tomorrow. But from what I saw at the Senior Bowl, from what I've seen him, in passing, again, length, physicality, and like you said, first exposure to him, no one knew who this kid was, or at least most of us had no clue who this kid was heading into the Senior Bowl. And Forno, you and I have been watching the Senior Bowl and covering it in different aspects for years now. There's always the one kid that you fear that when they're a Division II, Division III school, are they gonna are they gonna belong? And yeah, there was a kid like that this year, but that kid was not Joshua Williams. He was one of the better defensive backs down there. Our friends, Connor Rogers and Trevor Sigma raving about how good this kid was playing in Mobile. Can't wait to actually, dig into the tape myself. And I'm excited, man. I think from what I've heard, from what I've seen, wouldn't be surprised if I came away in that, round 3 area. Don't think he's going to make it past the 4th round.
Devin, your thoughts? Obviously, he's got the length. He showed out at the Senior Bowl, and Mike didn't bury him like the quarterback class, so that's always a good sign. What do you think?
I like him a lot. There you go. But I like him a lot. I did a film breakdown of him actually on Blue Chip Scouting and be able to look into his film, and he's just someone that he just clearly is the best player on the field at D2 level. Like there's no question that when you look at Fayetteville State, whoever they're playing against, he's erasing his side of the field. Like quarterbacks were scared to throw his way because he took the ball away at a pretty high rate. I think he had 6 or 8 interceptions in his 2.5 career year because he had to miss the 2020 season with COVID. So like he had tremendous ball production in a small amount of time, and it was funny watching him on film. He was baiting quarterbacks like he was a safety. Like he would play cover 3 bail technique and just force the quarterback to try and throw it down the sideline because it looked like he was out of position, but then he would turn it on and just go up and snag an interception. So with him, I think there's going to be a little bit of an adjustment period getting to the NFL level because there were times on film, even though he looked phenomenal in film, where he underestimated the speed of who he's going against and players got behind him, or he lost kind of awareness and deeper zone coverage because he's just not used to quarterbacks throwing it 60, 70 yards over his head, the D2 level. It's more like 40 to 50 on a good day. And there was a couple times on film where it was just pouring raining, so it wasn't going this way. So I think with Joshua Williams, he's going to come in, be a immediate special teams contributor. He's a great size profile, great testing at the combine. So he's clearly a really good athlete. But I think in terms of actually, playing within the confines of the defense and understanding responsibilities, I feel like there was a little bit of free, him freestyling because he just knew that the quarterbacks weren't going to throw over his head. But I think at the NFL level, there's going to be a bit of adjustment there. But I would take him round 3 because I have a round 3 grade on him.
Fantastic stuff, guys. Now, we've got 7 guys left and a mock draft, so we're going to do a little bit more rapid fire style. Mike, I know this is one of your guys. Coastal Carolina edge, Jeffrey Gunter. I loved what I saw from Gunter at Coastal Carolina. Incredibly disruptive. Did not test the best at the NFL Combine, but there's a lot to like from him. What is it about him that stands out to you?
I just think that he's got a very high floor. You know that he's going to come in. He's really good against the run. That's the one thing that I thought he improved the most on this year was, being able to do better in terms of reading on option, handoff options, speed options, and not overcommitting. And then he's a really he had a great floor every year at Coastal, 6.5 sacks, pretty much all 4 years he was there. He transferred out to NC State at one point, then transferred back. He's an older prospect. He probably had to answer in draft interviews why he transferred and then transferred back. But I just think that this is someone where, kind of like a Teron Jackson from Coastal last year, you can probably get him in round 6, round 7, and he can come in and as a rookie be like a 3 or 4 sack type guy, develop into a consistent 6 or 7 sack a year player. Sorry, I need more coffee.
Oh, and yeah, I need some more coffee too. But when you're talking about a guy you're going to get on day 3 to be able to be that kind of player, I think that's a really nice add. One of your guys, Devin, is really intriguing because he is a big guy and he comes from an even bigger guy. And that is Derek Deese Jr., son of former NFL offensive lineman Derek Deese Sr., played guard and tackle for the 90s Niners and into the 2000s. Derek Deese Jr. had abysmal quarterback play at San Jose State, but always found a way to make an impact, especially I remember watching that UNLV game and talking to you about Deese Jr. When you look at him and you look at how he projects in a really deep tight end class, well, what stands out about him outside of the rest?
Yeah, I think with him, you just see him be dominant at times. When the quarterback play was fairly decent, he was getting the force fed the ball, and he made that tremendous jump for me because I remember watching him, from 2019, and he just looked a step slow. He just looked like he was still figuring out the speed of the game and not as confident in his route running. 2020, he took a jump and he really found a connection with Nick Starkel when he was healthy. 2021 was more of a up and down year because of the quarterback position with Nick Starkel going down against Western Michigan. It kind of was all over the place throughout the year. And you had Nick Nash, who he was a decent quarterback, but he wasn't someone that was going to push the ball down the field consistently. So with him, he made so many tremendous catches over the course of the season on passes he had to make adjustments with. So it makes me wonder, with his ability to create separation against those safeties and linebackers and really create some yak situations. I just wonder if he had, even a better quarterback throwing him the football, that he would be much more productive. So with him, I think he's someone that comes in. He's probably going to be a tight end 3 or 4 to start off. I think he's going to be one of those guys that probably doesn't get drafted. I think he may go the UDFA route because of the lack of testing, and I just don't think he's an overall explosive athlete. But I think he can be someone that if you're in 2 or 3 tight end wide receiver or tight end sets, you can move him, be more that move H-back type of guy that you can send up the seams, someone that'd be very valuable in the red zone. and you have packages for him. I don't think he's going to ever become a all pro level tight end, but I do think he can be someone that sticks around the league 8-10 years as a solid backup or third tight end that you really utilize on passing downs.
Yeah, and as we kind of transition away from the tight end position and some of these playmakers, we're going to talk about the nitty gritty, and we've got 3 offensive linemen that we need to talk about, and I know Mike is licking his chops because we're going to start with Nebraska's Cam Jergens, the beef jerky maker himself, somebody that Dane Brugler has as a second round grade, which I thought was incredibly high, but we also know that Brugler does more and better work than pretty much everybody else in the industry. Mike, when you take a look at Jergens, he kind of fits what the Vikings want in a center. He's got athleticism. He knows how to make reach blocks, knows how to get to that second level, and he also has a little bit of that sand in the pants. What about his game stands out the most to you?
Well, if you want to make this a true Vikings connection, this is what Vikings fans were hoping they were going to get from Garrett Bradbury. Like you said, good athlete, but with a little bit more sand in the pants. I love Cam Jergens. I would argue that aside from Tyler Linderbaum, he's probably my favorite center in this entire class. I absolutely love Cam Jergens. I really want to get on his good side so he can send me some of that beef jerky I've heard about. I gave him a 3rd round grade, so I actually don't think that Dane's that far off. I thought that with his athletic testing and the fact that, again, you watch the film, the dude's just a dog, and that's exactly what you want. You want someone that can move, can be used on pull blocks, but also, like, when they're being used on a pull block, don't you want them to clear a path as well? That's a big thing that, like, listen, I know some Vikings fans really like Garrett Bradbury, but that's just not who he is. This is what you want in a modern NFL center.
And speaking of modern NFL centers, we're going to move on to a guy who played tackle at Wake Forest, but is likely to be best suited on the inside, and that is Zach Tom. A very interesting name just because it's 2 first name, and it's not Thomas or Zachary. It's Zach Tom. I find the name fun and fascinating.
And he was right after Zachary Thomas at the Combine.
Yeah, I know. That's one of those hilarious little nuances. Devin, when you look at Zach Tom, talking about a guy who's going to transition from tackle to center is not something you see often. The Vikings were trying to do that with Kyle Hinton, who they drafted out of Washburn in the 7th round 2 years ago, but that hasn't necessarily panned out quite yet. But with Tom, it just feels like it's going to make the most sense. What do you think about Zach Tom in his... Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think when you look at Zach Tom, I think the first thing that stood out to him was his film against Jermaine Johnson. And Jermaine Johnson is a de facto first rounder by most people. And he essentially shut him out. He was able to replace his hands really well, be able to move side to side laterally, and really erase everything Jermaine Johnson was throwing at him. And that game alone really made me want to dive deeper into his tape, and that's exactly what I did. And you know, he played center in 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021. He played tackle. So, you know, maybe you do try him out at tackle. I don't think he necessarily fits the measurables or exactly what you're looking for at the tackle position. But in terms of run block, Anthony can fit anywhere on the offensive line. You know, he does a really good job. He's not one of those guys that's going to be a Trevor Penning in the run game where he absolutely dismantles people or Akim Ekwonu. But I do think he's going to be rock solid. You play him at center, you play him at guard. You're not going to have to really worry about him. He's someone that can play on the island. You know, he's gone against some of the best edge rushers in the ACC throughout his career and handled it really well. So everything about him is technically sound. He's just one of those guys that, you know, maybe goes into round 3, early round 4, but becomes immediate starter in a 10 to 12 year vet. That people will go back and look at it and say, why wasn't this guy drafted higher? Because he just had the technical upside that some of the guys lack on the offensive line that are ahead of him.
Yeah, and I completely agree with all of that. The last offensive lineman we're going to talk about has one of the more fun names, and that is Cole Strange. But I do want to point out, next week's guest, Ian Cummings, is in the chat saying that 2 first names equals UDFA. When you're talking about drip, I totally understand what you're saying, but I can live with it for certain prospects. I mean, like Jamar Chase, yeah, you really can't argue with that. But as we move on to Cole Strange, guard prospect from Tennessee Chattanooga, likely is going to play center at the next level as well. Mike, he was nasty at the Senior Bowl with an offensive line group that was relatively underwhelming because the edge group just really took over, and Perry and Winfrey ate everybody's lunch and went back for seconds. When you looked at Strange, he was one of the best interior guys in Mobile. What is there to like about this young man, and how high can he go?
Well, first, I said earlier that Cam Jurgens might be my favorite, center prospect outside of Tyler Linderbaum. If it's not Jurgens, it's Cole Strange. Absolutely loved watching him down the Senior Bowl. I mentioned it earlier. There's always the small school guy on the offensive line. We've seen Ali Marpet, Ben Barch in past years. This year, it was Strange. One thing I loved about him is he could get beat on a rep, and given the nature of the Senior Bowl practice, he had to get right back up and do and do the next rep right away. You didn't beat him twice in a row, and the same player didn't get him twice at any point in the week, which is great because it means that he's got a very short memory, doesn't get down on himself. We see a lot in those one-on-one drills that are catered to the defensive lineman that the offensive lineman gives up, the highlight worthy, tweet worthy rep, and then gets in a bit of a funk. And that's not the case with Cole Strange. And it transfers over to his film on Chattanooga. UT Chattanooga was incredibly fun to watch because you could easily find Cole Strange. He's the guard and center prospect, sending defensive linemen flying up the field or just burying them in the dirt. I think he's going to be a great kind of depth interior player, whether center or guard, in like year 1, year 2. I think by the end of his rookie contract, he's a full-time starter. I have him, if I'm just checking right now, Cole Strange. I have him at 97th on my board. Yeah, I have a third on him.
Yeah. And you know what? That's really speaks to the depth of this class. At 97th overall, you have a third round grade, and those second and third rounds are going to be loaded with talent, unlike some other years. Devin, there are two guys that are left on this list. Yeah, there are two guys left on this list, and you were the first person I remember talking about both of these guys, which is the least surprising thing in the history of the world. First one, Western Michigan's Ali Fayad. Really, really fun player, nice motor. He's got some tools to work with. I worry that he's not going to be valued as much by the NFL as we may be valuing him. Tell me about Ali Fayad.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think when I watch any edge rusher and really any this season, like outside the top few guys, I think he has one of the best toolboxes that you'll see. And he just does a little bit of everything. He does a spin, he does a cross chop, he does the speed to power. There's so many moves in his arsenal that makes him such an interesting guy. And, you look at the measurables, he's not the biggest guy, he's not the fastest one, but he has that unrelenting, play style where he's going to find a way to get home to a quarterback no matter what. Now, I kind of worry about where exactly he's going to go or where he's going to play, but being able to actually like sit down and talk with him, he's just a determined, driven guy. He's someone that, I think a team could really take a swing on in round 6 or round 7, and he's going to find a way to make the roster because he's going to do whatever it takes to get on that football field. And I think maybe you get him as an outside backer and try to utilize him in that route. Maybe you just use him as a pure pass rusher. But in terms of skill set in Western Michigan playing against big schools over the last couple of years, they play like Michigan State and Pitt. He showed up every time, even against Michigan. He was able to cause disruption this season. So he's not one of those small school guys that only show up against the small opponents. He's also showing up against the big Power 5 schools. And that toolbox is tremendous. I really think with that ability and someone that has so many different go-to moves, I think he's going to be someone that maybe he reaches his ceiling higher, faster than some other prospects in this class because he has that advanced skill set. And maybe he's not the high profile guy that's going to get 10, 12 sacks. I'm not expecting that from him, but I think he can stick around and be a true rotational edge guy throughout his career, but someone you can count on and come in and make a play when he's called upon.
Yeah, Fayad really impressed me when I was able to watch some good old Maction. And Western Michigan was one of the best teams in the MAC as far as entertainment value because they also had Caleb Elby and Sky Moore and a really nice backfield as well. Last guy we're going to talk about, Montana State's Troy Anderson. And because we are running a little short on time, I know, Devin, that you were the one who brought him to our attention. I want some quick hitting thoughts on the really athletic linebacker that transitioned from running back just a couple years ago. Mike, we'll start with you. Quick hitting thoughts on Troy Anderson.
Do it all. I think he's a year one starter. Again, wasn't really expecting too much when I threw the tape on him. I knew Devin was a big fan of his, but I know Devin's a fan of any player that's ever put on a helmet. So I had to see whether or not he was just a downhill thumper. No, I think he's a very good player in terms of dropping into coverage. He ended up coming away with a day 2 grade from me. So I mean, you know what? Little quick hitter for Devin. Devin, your presentation on Blue Chip Scouting's YouTube channel got me an A on an assignment. So you know what? He's forever a brand guy just because he helped me get an A.
There we go. Devin, quick hitting thoughts.
I'm going to try to keep it brief because this is also one of my guys, obviously, but fast, athletic, can match with what some of the NFL does on a east to west basis in terms of running sideline to sideline. I think there's some upside in coverage as well. I like him as a sandbacker in a 3-4 defense. I think he's someone that is going to be able to really cause havoc with his length and ability to match and mirror short area routes. So he's a really tremendous player, and obviously a day 2 grade from me, but someone that is really risen among the draft community and just shine at the Senior Bowl. He's just one of the biggest shine, probably has his stock raised the most from the Senior Bowl of any defensive player that went down there.
And one of the most impressive things about Anderson is he ran in the 4.4s in the 40-yard dash. Really, really fast player that can, as you both said, do it all. We are going to transition here into the mock draft, but first, I want to remind everybody about our great sponsors, Lake Monster Brewing, located in Minneapolis. And they not only brew tremendous beers, but they are going to be hosting us on Friday, April 29th, for the live coverage of the second round of the NFL Draft. You can catch me there, Matt, Miles, Ryan, and even the great Flip Mozzie is making the flight in for it. We are going to be starting at 5:30 and going until the round is over. You will not want to miss this and miss the great beers that Lake Monster has to offer. I have some of the Como Claw Pilsner in my fridge right now. I love a good, crisp beer, and they deliver with that, and they have a lot of other options as well. Gentlemen, one thing we do on this show is we finish off with a mock draft, and Dave is going to get that ready to rock for us. Hit it, Dave.
Welcome to Climbing the Pocket's Mock Draft Mondays. Who will the Vikings pick, and who's your favorite choice?
And here we go. Gentlemen, the way this works, you guys are running the board. I'm gonna kind of play host here. We're going to do a 3-round mock draft for the Minnesota Vikings. Take it whatever direction you want, because one of the reasons why we do this every week, we like to explore scenarios and situations. And it's something that I've done for the Vikings Wire consistently. And it's the more situations that you focus on, the better perspective you can have of how the draft might actually play out, because there's always something that throws a major wrench into things every single year. And as Dave starts it, gentlemen, what are we thinking for the Minnesota Vikings here in round 1?
Part of me kind of just wants to draft a quarterback just to see Vikings Twitter burn, because I know that you're going to catch all of the flack in your mentions, and I'm going to skate free and have a lovely Canadian evening. But I'm not going to do that today. I'm torn on where to go with the Vikings because I still think that they could use some help in the secondary. They're definitely a team with more needs than most care to admit. They just need good players at this point, and I think that with the front office in check, they're going to be looking for more analytics driven picks. So more valuable picks. We're not going to see interior offensive linemen, linebackers, and running backs going early. Probably not in this draft.
I agree. Devin, are you taking a similar perspective here?
I think you just see how the board falls, honestly, and I think it really depends on who's going to be available at 12 for the Minnesota Vikings. So for me, I think it comes down to a couple of different guys. For me, if there's a blue chip receiver on the board, you take him. You know, if there's not a corner or edge, and I think to me having I think obviously this is going to be a top heavy defensive class. So if you can get one of those guys who you think can be a star in their medical checkout, someone like a Derek Stingley, I think it's someone you don't want to pass up on potentially if he's there. Or, say a scenario where, I don't know, a Sauce Gardner would happen to fall or something like that. I think you got to have guys on the board that are blue chip guys, and as we pull it up here, we'll see what's available. But I mean, the sky's the limit. I mean, we got Jermaine Johnson and Derek Singh. That's exactly the exact scenario that I was talking about. One of those guys could immediately help the Vikings out.
Yeah, let's take a look at the board right now. Jermaine Johnson, Derek Stingley Jr., Drake London, Kenny Pickett, Barf, Jameson Williams, Jordan Davis, Devontae Wyatt, and the great Chris Olave, wide receiver 1. Gentlemen, the board is yours. What are we thinking? What do you think the best direction is? Because the trades that were offered to us were not very good.
Well, okay, like I said, not going to go quarterback because I don't want your mentions to burn. You are my friend. And also, I refuse to draft Kenny Pickett in round 1. I do, however, like the Derek Stingley idea there because, Cam Dantzler's been okay. Chandon Sullivan in the slot, and Patrick Peterson is 33, 34 now. How long is he
32.
Really going to be able to? Is he 32? Thought he was older than that. Thought he was 33. My apologies. So he's 32
he came
years
in the league
old.
at 20. He feels like he's an ancient old man, but he's not.
Right? But point still stands. Like we're talking about a player that's definitely more trending downwards. And I mean, can you imagine at the beginning of the year saying that Derek Stingley was going to be available at 12 overall?
I don't think he'll be available at 12 overall. And I'll be honest,
I don't think he will be.
Cartwheels, so I don't have to deal with him being available at 12 overall and sweating him out.
Yeah.
You remember how I sweated out Elijah Vera Tucker last year? That's going to be me this year with Derek Stingley Jr.
Did you not like the AVT? Like, did you? Oh no, you didn't want AVT at all because guards don't matter.
Guard,
I thought he was a guard, and I was out. All right, gentlemen, we are.
If it were up to me,
I'm going
Stingley.
Devin?
I think I'm going to go Stingley here. Jermaine Johnson is certainly, someone that I would very much like on the Vikings, but I just think you got to answer the cornerback, question, and you need an answer. So I like Derek Stingley to go here.
Man, fascinating. Answering the cornerback question with a guy who is oft injured and hasn't played great football since 2019. Really answering a question with a question. That's a ballsy move, gentlemen. I respect it. And apparently you guys are both cowards for not drafting a guard on my show just to mess with me. So, Boss Man really getting under your skin tonight. All right, so we can give up a 6th and a 5th. Yeah. So kind of my rule is you only make the trade if it one makes sense and two is actually logical. There are some where you give up a 6 to move up like 10 spots around. Like, no, that's
What is
nobody's
this?
gonna offer that. Like, some of these offers are no bueno.
Yeah. I would just hold Pat at 46 regardless.
All right, let's hold.
Yeah,
we'll
I mean,
hold
there's
back
going to be a good
Pat at
football
46.
player that. There's going to be a good football at 46. So, I mean, good football player
Here we
at
go.
the very least.
We got some good football players. Quay Walker, Matt Corral, Breece Hall, Tyler Smith, Christian Harris, Kenneth Walker III, Sam Howell, Travis Jones, Isaiah Spiller, Sean Ryan, and the big fat lead himself, Daniel Falele. Devin, what do you like on the board right now?
This is a tough one because a lot on this board. The Vikings are not in huge demand of. Can I see who's available at the safety position, Dave? Because I'm not seeing a lot immediately here that's
Jared
striking my
disrespects friends of
interest.
the show. Can't buy them.
Look, Cam Bynum's great, man, but look, we need to add some talent there, man. Some more talent. Anyway, the value is not great right now. I'll tell you that at the safety position. The latest guys
Petrie and
are
Brisker
go
went off
maybe
at
late
34 and
round 3.
35.
Yeah, that's tough. Interior defensive line, I guess, will be the next one that I look at here.
You're looking at a 5
Travis Jones
here.
is there. See, this one's tough because if Logan Hall's on the board, I mean, I'd be hard pressed not to take him because I just think he just makes the most sense.
He
Mike?
does, but then you have Tomlinson where he's a nose, but can he play like can Tomlinson play 5 tech? Can Jones play 5 tech? I'm running into that issue. I think you need the linebacker on the interior is a low key need going to a more of a 3-4 base defense because you do have Eric Kendricks, but Kendricks has been around for a bit, and then Jordan Hicks has bounced around the league for the last couple of years. It all depends on how much this team really values Chaz Surratt, who wasn't selected by this regime. If you want athleticism and just a mauler at linebacker, Quay Walker makes a lot of sense here. I think it's a little high for him, but it makes sense in terms of what they need.
All right, so we have one Travis Jones, one Quay Walker. I will be the tiebreaker here. As much as I love Travis Jones, and I love Travis Jones, I think because of the uncertain future surrounding Eric Kendricks, I think Quay Walker is the pick here. He just adds an element of versatility to the middle of that Vikings defense that they just don't necessarily have. Jordan Hicks is a very solid, serviceable player, but I don't think he's a long-term answer either. So while linebacker isn't high on the priority need, they can be multiple with Quay Walker and the guys that they currently have.
Yeah, I mean that's fair.
I'd say
I just think there just wasn't someone there at that particular spot, especially the interior defensive line that had that 5 tech versatility, and maybe it was a little high to get Logan Hall. I think he did go off the board recently too. So we'll see what happens here and who was available in this next pick. But I would like to definitely target safety if there's a quality safety there. Because round 3, where the Vikings are right now at 77, I think you can maybe quote unquote reached it. I mean, the rankings aren't necessarily reflective of what we think of these players, but I
There
think
goes
safety
Kirby
is
Joseph.
certainly
That
be
would
a
have been my
player.
safety.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Devin counterpoint. I'm looking at the Vikings depth chart, and Jesse Davis is the starting guard in the NFL still. This time for the Vikings. We need to change that. Show me who's available on the interior. Dylan Parham would have been perfect, but of course the Ravens had to steal him from us.
I don't understand why the Ravens would prioritize Parham. He's not
They
a
wouldn't.
scheme fit at all.
He's not at all.
I mean, Cole
All right,
Strange
well,
is on the board though, so
Let's go through the board here real quick, and then I'll give you guys an opportunity to chat about it. Isaiah Spiller, Carson Strong, Brian Asamoah, Darian Kennard, Darian Beavers, Nick Benito, Troy Anderson, Channing Tisdall, Cade Otton, Jeremy Rucker, Greg Dulcich, Ed Ingram, Zach Carter, Fedarian Mathis.
Forno. What type
Yes.
of guard do the Vikings need? Do they need more of a power guard, or do they need more of a move guard?
They need a guard who isn't a traffic cone.
Okay, so that describes all
they're going to
three of the top
prioritize
guards.
athleticism, wide zone style run blocking, and hopefully don't sacrifice pass blocking in doing so.
To me, that screams Ed Ingram. I love Ed Ingram. I think he's a cleaner fit than, say, a Darian Kennard, who's going to have to make the transition from tackle to guard, and then the other one that's available at the bottom is Cole Strange, who's going to be playing center. Yeah, I mean, you can't have Jesse Dance starting.
I mean, this one's tough.
They did bring in Chris Reed, just to be fair, and he graded out as an average guard, which is the whole antithesis of guards that matter. Find average guards. I don't think Jesse Davis is going to end up starting for this team. They're going to have a real competition with those two and Wyatt Davis.
I mean, this one's interesting because you talk about wide zone scheme, and I'm trying to think if Dave could pull up the interior offensive line group here. I just want to take a closer look. Who else is available that isn't going to be too much out of the range here at 77? You got Cam Jergens as someone that can fit the outside zone scheme. I would like to make an argument that Cam Jergens maybe. I mean, I know he played center at the college level, but to me, I think of these guys on the board, and you talk about that outside zone scheme and utilizing that, I think he's a perfect fit.
I actually agree. I think Jergens is perfect, whether it's center or guard. I think he's a great scheme fit, and we talked about him earlier. The dude's just a dog, and that's what that interior has needed for years.
You know what? That's a perfect way to end this mock draft. Taking one of the guys that we identified as a potential sleeper in this draft. Gentlemen, we didn't do too bad of a job. We got Derek Stingley Jr., we got Quay Walker, and we got Cam Jergens. 3 guys that should ideally play right away. And you got to feel good about that. I still don't like the Derek Stingley Jr. pick, but I get it. I've gone on ad nauseum about it. Gentlemen, as Ian says, Mike is just trying to get the beef jerky because, as you can tell, he doesn't make enough money to afford it on his $5 a week allowance. So I appreciate you coming on and being able to share the wealth of knowledge that you have about these prospects with everybody here. I know you guys have a lot coming up with it being the NFL draft. Mike, I'll start with you since I keep making 9-year-old jokes about you. What do you have coming down the pipeline for the people?
Starting tomorrow, right through to the draft, I'm pretty sure I have at least one piece of draft work coming every single day. I've been dropping over the weekend my final grades. That'll finish off with my final big board. And then the week of the draft, I will be doing the day before the draft, I have the what I would do mock draft. And then the day of, I have what I think will happen. Devin and I are going to be doing podcasts throughout. And then Devin and I are also going to be on Blue Chip Scouting's live coverage of the draft all 3 days. Or Devin on the first day, me on the second. And I believe one, if not both of us on day 3.
Perfect. What was that podcast that you referenced, Mike? Where can they find it?
That would be Big Shots Podcast. Big Shots NFL Draft Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at Big Shots Pod.
Perfect. That's good stuff. I've listened to a lot of their shows, been on multiple times. It is a lot of really good stuff that you're going to find very similar to what we did tonight. Devin, you are a busy man as always. What do you have going on?
Yeah, so I'm going to release my first big board of NFL draft early next week. Still fine-tuning that and trying to get that ready to go. But that's going to be released sometime next week, obviously, before the draft and finally get that out. Obviously, podcasts Mike. Going to finish up some more of our podcast series, or not podcast series, but mock draft series that we're doing at Blue Chip Scouting, doing all 32 teams before draft day. So got the Browns one I'm doing coming up. It'll be coming out sometime tomorrow, and then some more later in the week, the Texans and Jets as well. So obviously it's the Viking podcast, so I'm not going to plug that too hard because people care about the Vikings content here. But if you're interested to see how other teams might fare, definitely check it out on Blue Chip Scouting's YouTube page, along with other video breakdowns. We talk about the Troy Anderson video, but some other prospects like Jelani Woods, Shasha Williams, etc.
Awesome stuff, guys. And as we transition to Dave to tell us what is coming up next Monday, it is our last show before the NFL draft. And I have a very special guest, a friend of the three of ours, and that is Pro Football Network draft analyst Ian Cummings. We're going to have a really nice conversation about the draft, and the topics we have not secured down yet, but we are going to be talking a lot about specifics, talking about picks, a lot of positions, and we're going to be getting Ian's thoughts as he has spent a lot of time doing this. And there he is in the comments. Really excited to be able to talk with him. Dave, welcome to the show.
Hey, we've got a fun week planned. Hopefully tomorrow night we have In the Huddle. Wednesday, we have Deontay Lee joining us for Vikings Happy Hour, and the guys will be at Lake Monster Brewing. It'll be our third and final tune-up before the live show on day 2 of the draft. Thursday, we'll have a Viking Hot Takes, and then again on Saturday, you'll get myself and Darren wrapping things up with 2 old bloggers. Hopefully we surprised a lot of people this last Saturday.
No, I listened to the show yesterday, Dave. You guys did a really good job taking a unique perspective on how players pan out.
That's it. We're all draft 24/7 from here on out.
Yes, sir. We are going to be all draft, and it is going to be all draft for me as well. I had 2 of my 7 articles that are dropping this week drop today. You can find them on my Twitter timeline. For Mike, for Dave, for Devin, I am Forno. Thank you for tuning in, letting us turn your Monday purple, and Skol Vikings.
Skol Vikings! Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and rate us on your favorite aggregator. And a special shout out goes to our partners, The Daily Norseman, where the best Vikings content can be found, and to Lake Monster Brewing, home of the best beer in Minnesota. Skol, everybody.